All right, I'm going to kick us off. Good afternoon. I'm the Texas Workforce Commission's press officer, Angela Wellner. Thanks all for joining us for May's labor release media briefing. We're glad that you're all here to discuss the most recent employment data for the state of Texas. We have Chairman Daniel available to answer your questions today about this most recent report. Now, today's briefing is specific to the Texas labor market data release. If we cannot answer your question today during this briefing, go ahead and email us at press@twc.texas.gov. I'll put that in the chat in just a minute too. And we'll work to fulfill that request after the conference. This briefing runs from 1 to 1:30 p.m. After our opening remarks from Chairman Daniel, we will take questions. To ask a question, please raise your virtual hand in the chat. I will then make you a panelist and you'll have a brief pause before you can then turn on your camera and mic. You can also type a question if you prefer into the chat, and I'll go ahead and ask that. Please be aware that we are recording this media briefing and we'll make it available shortly after the event ends. Again, thank you all for attending. Now let's hear the latest jobs data from Chairman Daniel and the TWC Labor Market Information Department. Chairman.
Well, thank you so much, Angela. Appreciate everybody joining us today. Lots of good news, another record-setting month that we're reporting on. Records in both the number of Texans in the labor force and a new record for the number of jobs that we see in the state. We lead among all the other states in a couple different categories. But let's dive into that data, I think, in a more in-depth way. Joining me today is Will Lutz with our Labor Market Information Department. Will walk us through a few slides here so you can get a better understanding of the data, and then I think we'll have an opportunity to answer questions that you may have. Will?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's great to be here. Once again, we have a really strong Texas labor market. In spite of all of the challenges in the world we live in, our labor market performance is still doing quite well. So let's start with the number that everybody often references, and that is the unemployment rate. Our unemployment rate is at 4.1% seasonally adjusted, slightly higher than the United States rate of 3.7%, but still an indicator of a strong labor market. If you want a job in Texas, you have a very strong probability of attaining one. The number of unemployed increased over the month by 10,600 people, but the number of employed actually went up by more than that. It went up by 38,300 people. So people are finding our jobs market attractive. They're trying to find a job here in Texas. And, obviously at TWC, we're interested in making sure there's a good job for every, helping good employers find the work they need and workers find the jobs that are good jobs for them. So we still have a strong labor market. Now looking at the number of jobs based on our current employment statistics program, the over the month change in the number of jobs is 51,000 jobs, led by professional business services, which is a 21,500 job change. That's seasonally adjusted figures. And a lot of that change in professional and business services is driven by administrative support, waste management, and remediation services. So most of our major industries experienced growth over the month. Construction and manufacturing had slight declines, and leisure and hospitality, which had regained a lot of employment in previous months, also had a slight decline. So when you look at our labor force participation rate, which is the percentage of the population that 16 and over non-institutional population that is either looking for a job or has one, that is now at 64.2%. We continue to outpace the nation both in employment to population ratio and also our labor force participation rate. So again, we have a labor market that is attractive both for employers and for employees. So that's if you look at it on an MSA basis, you notice that Midland and Odessa both have labor force increasing quite substantially in both of those metropolitan areas. San Antonio, 3.3% increase. Dallas, Fort Worth, Arlington, and Austin, Round Rock. We had two metropolitan areas, Texarkana and Tyler, that had a slight decline in the civilian labor force. Again, the civilian labor force is either people who are looking for a job or people who have a job. So again, we have strong growth in every part of Texas, partly driven by recovery in areas that had a lot of oil and gas in it, but also our four largest metropolitan areas all have seen strong employment and labor force growth over the year. And speaking of job growth, for 20 consecutive months, the state of Texas has set records in terms of series high in current employment statistics job growth. We are still over the year at 4%. And just to give everybody an idea, prior to 2020, we were doing, in February 2020, we were at 2%, and we were very happy with that. That was considered very good nationally. And we have been at 4% job growth for several months now and are sustaining that at least in the near term. Again, some of that is probably the economy returning to where it was, but we're expanding in Texas. We are now in an expansion area after what we went through a few years ago. We are now expanding as a job market and as an economy. I'm already mentioned the industry growth. Sorry that I kind of jumped ahead a couple of slides there, but you could see that our industries are being led again, as I mentioned earlier, by professional and business services. Again, 51,000 increase in jobs over the month. One of the things that we track is what we call the COVID Recovery Index, which looks at our current employment as a percentage of the employment in February of 2020. As you will notice, we are at 107.3%. That outpaces substantially the national number, which is at 102.5%. In 10 of 11 major industries, we are outpacing the United States. And the only major industry in Texas that has not gotten back to February of 2020 is mining and logging. And we are seeing some growth in the mining and logging areas. But one of the things that I think is worth highlighting is what we've seen in the metro areas. As you see, all of our metro areas are growing in terms of jobs. But one of the things I think we need to remember is that our largest metropolitan areas, most of them are above 4% over the year job growth. You have San Antonio, New Braunfels, which went up to 4.4% compared to this time last year. Austin Round Rock is at 4.2%. Dallas, Fort Worth, Arlington is at 4.1%, and Houston, the Woodlands, Sugarland is at 3.7%. So those four metropolitan areas are 70% of the state's, roughly 70%, it fluctuates from month to month, of the state's civilian labor force. And so they are a big economic engine for the rest of the state. And several of them are the topics of national discussion. I mean, most of you obviously are aware of some of the storm clouds that are on the national horizon. But despite a lot of the conversation about what is going to happen in the job market in the future, right now, the data in Texas is really strong, particularly in our largest metropolitan areas. And just to provide an idea, and again, this is net increase. So if there were job losses, these numbers we're talking about over the year change, you have to have growth that offsets that. In Dallas, Fort Worth, Arlington, in 1 year alone, we're talking about 167,700. So think about all that would have to happen for jobs and employment in a region to expand by that number of jobs. That is a lot of jobs that are increased in 1 year alone. So for the metropolitan areas that large to be at or above 4% shows that both laborers and also employers are expressing a lot of confidence in the job market that we have here in Texas. One of the things that obviously we have been watching very closely is what has been occurring with pay, with some of the conversations about inflation and cost of living. We obviously want to track how people are doing. One measure that we use to track that is called average hourly earnings. And you can see that total private average hourly earnings increased by 4.2%. You see that most of our major industry groups over the year have growth. Professional business services had a slight decline, but remember that that is a high-paying industry to begin with. So one of our industries that historically pays its employees quite well had a slight decline, where some of the other industries have strong gains in wages. So I think that is also very noteworthy. Unemployment claims, the statistically unemployed and those people collecting unemployment insurance are different concepts, but our unemployment claims here in Texas continue to be low. Our initial claims is the first week you claim unemployment insurance. Continued claims are people who are continuing to claim unemployment insurance. So all things considered, we have a very strong labor market in Texas. Obviously, we are watching very carefully the national horizon and developments in the industries that are important to Texas. But again, when you have the kind of job growth that we've been seeing here in the state of Texas, we'll take it. Texas is a great place to be, and it's especially a great place to be if you want to hire people or you want to have a job. Thank you very much. And the other big thing that I think we've been highlighting is that our civilian labor force surpassed 15 million people for the first time. Again, just to summarize, our employment achieved record highs for 20 consecutive months. And we have outpaced our annual growth. We have outpaced all of the other states at 4%. So we've led in jobs gained annually and over the month. Thank you very much. We really appreciate your interest in the Texas economy.
All right, thanks so much. Well, Angela, let me kick it back to you to see if there's any questions out there that we might be able to answer.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Will and Chairman, for that great jobs report. Let's go ahead and see if we have any media. Again, please raise your virtual hand so that I can call on you, and then I'll make you a panelist. And at that point, it looks like I do have a hand raised. So Fox and Dallas, I'm going to promote you to panelist. You're going to have just a brief moment of quiet, then you can turn on your mic and camera. So again, this question will be coming to us from Fox 4 News in Dallas. Please feel free to turn on your mic and your camera.
Hey there. Yeah, I wanted to get your expertise on if it's true. I'm hearing some analysts that say that the Great Resignation is over. And is that accurate? And is it a good idea for people to be maybe staying put at this point in the economy?
Well, that's a really good question. So I'm looking at a couple different data sources, and I'm going to also talk anecdotally. I think if you want some specific data, we can probably provide it to you after today. So what I'm seeing is the number of folks that are quitting their job, typically quitting their job to stay in the workforce in a different job. That number actually appears to be fairly consistent with where it has been. And there's always turnover in the workforce as people get promoted or decide to go work for a different company. There's lots of different reasons why someone might switch jobs. We're not seeing the elevated numbers that we saw that led some folks to coin that phrase, the Great Resignation, 18 months ago, 24 months ago, that we might have seen. In terms of staying where you are, that's actually a really good part of your question. And my answer would be, that's not necessarily the case. It's probably going to be dependent on which sector you're working in, which field, what your job is. There's a little over 600,000 open jobs in the state right now, and that means that there's job opportunities for people. So some fields who have been nationally contracting a little bit, I think people would probably say, let me kind of see what's going on in my area. I think there are other fields in the state, certainly business services and some other things that are expanding a little bit right now. We're seeing more jobs come online. So like the Great Resignation was in the first place, I think some of that's dependent on where you are. I think some of it's dependent on what your job is. And I think some of it's dependent on what your appetite is for moving to a different job, getting a promotion, or whatever the case may be. What I'm seeing is a great deal of stability in the Texas job market. Employers continue to create jobs. People are competing for and getting those jobs. A lot of Texans are getting a better job as a result. You saw a slide on what wages have done in the state, and they have come up. And I think that's just simply a testament to the strength of the job market here. So, the Great Resignation still in place. I think it's just going to be a matter of kind of personal opinion where you are, what you want to be doing. I think there's a lot of opportunities for folks who want to get the right kind of reskilling or upskilling or already have that training, who want to plug into the job market in a meaningful way or a more meaningful way, depending on where they are in their career path.
Could you also talk about what are maybe some of the factors that have contributed to the Texas unemployment rate being higher than the national unemployment rate?
Well, so I asked that question yesterday in great detail, and had a very good conversation overnight with some of our economists here. There's a couple things going on, and I don't want to get terribly long-winded with the answer, but I want to give you just a little bit of context so you can appreciate where I'm coming from. When we ask people if they're unemployed, they self-report that they're unemployed. It's basically a poll that takes place once a month. It's survey data, and we simply ask the question: Are you not working? Do you want to be working? And are you looking for work? And so that number comes back, whatever that percentage is of the civilian labor force. I asked the question because we've seen our unemployment rate move up a couple of decimal, 0.2 of a point, but we've seen it move up over the last couple of months. So I'm curious as to maybe what's driving that. If we were at 3.9, we're at 4.1 now. Like, why did we move up a little bit? What does that mean nationally? You've seen the Texas unemployment rate narrow on the national rate. We are still higher than that. And I think what we're seeing is a little more optimism about the Texas job market. So a specific question I asked yesterday was, are people now telling us they're unemployed and now showing up in the civilian labor force as unemployed, and they haven't been participating in the job market? And the answer to that question turned out to be true. So there are people now entering the Texas civilian labor force that weren't working before. In other words, they didn't lose a job to find themselves unemployed. They may have retired and are coming back. They may have taken, some particular sabbatical from work, and they're coming back into the labor force. And that would indicate to me just some strength of the labor force and some optimism on the part of people that want to be a part of that labor force. You saw about 10,000 more unemployed folks this month than we saw last month, but nearly 40,000 more employed people. And so I think what we're seeing, based on the data that they've been able to put together for me, is that people are entering or re-entering the workforce when they haven't been working full-time. They're reevaluating where they are, and they really think they have a good opportunity of getting the kind of job that they want and having some opportunities for themselves there. So us being slightly higher than the U.S. Unemployment rate here, I don't want to minimize someone's unemployment status. I think there's some things we can do to help them. But by the same token, I think there are people in Texas who are telling us they're unemployed because they see some opportunities and they want to see what kind of job they can get. I don't think we're necessarily seeing that across the country. And I know other states are experiencing not quite the same job gains that Texas has been seeing. And so I could see why people who live in those states might not have the same level of optimism about the workforce.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much for those questions. Do I have any other media that would like to ask questions? Again, please raise your virtual hand, and we'll go ahead and have those questions answered for you. I'll give it another moment. If not, I will, of course, turn it back over to our chairman for some closing thoughts. And seeing no more hands, Chairman, thanks so much for holding this briefing. Our next one is going to be coming up on Friday, July 21st, and take it away.
Hey, thanks again, Angela. Will, thanks so much for an incredible slideshow. New record set, 15 million people working in the state. We're seeing employers still want to create jobs. There's a little over 600,000 job announcements in the state right now. As we continue to set employment records and as we continue to set records for the number of people who are in the Texas civilian labor force, TWC is going to use this as an opportunity to really double down on our efforts to help employers find that talent that they're looking for and make sure that every Texan who's trying to work here in Texas has the skills they need and the opportunities to compete in that job market. Love reporting on Texas being a leader among all the U.S. states and certainly among the 10 largest states. When you look at our gains over the past month and even the past year, we can see that employers have a great deal of optimism about this state. And frankly, I think we can take away from that employers have a great deal of optimism about Texans and all the folks that make up that Texas workforce. Do appreciate everybody making time to be with us today. We certainly enjoy this opportunity to talk about what's going on amongst that Texas workforce and here in Texas. Appreciate your interest in that. Look forward to seeing you next time.